And on Zoom, we have Councillors White, Von Daddelson, and Winters, and Councillor Eatey for lateness. Oh, he's here. Oh my, how am I? I'd just like to read out the Chair's opening statement. So just to remind councillors that this meeting is being live streamed and recorded, and that the recording will be made available on the Bay of Plenty Regional Council website following the meeting. I also remind all present that local government decision making affords no protection to councillors, council officers and the public for comments made during meetings that are subsequently challenged in a court of law and determined to be slanderous. So going back to the apologies, can I have a mover and a seconder for those? So public forum, there is no public forum, no items not on the agenda, no change of order of business, any declaration of conflicts of interest? There are none. So we're on to the minutes. So the minutes from the strategy and policy meeting on the 18th of June. Any corrections? There are none. So could I have a mover and seconder to confirm those minutes as true and correct? Thank you. All right, so we're on to our report. So we've got the operating environment, very much moving goalposts and a lot to grapple with once again. So welcome to the team. Yeah, welcome Stephen, Freya and Elsa. The floor is yours.
Kia ora koutou. We do a presentation, not so much on the operating environment report, but on the announcement made by government to stop plan changes. So that's where we want to present on. We were going to be presenting something very different. We were going to be presenting a geothermal plan change. Clearly we're not, but we do have a presentation on, in a sense, the balance of the geothermal program, and then also where this leaves us with fresh water as well. Because again, that was a plan change which was on pause, was extended out by this announcement. So again, where does that leave us? So these two are going to present on geothermal, and then there's a team with James and others to present on fresh water. But just in terms of a quick overview of where this came in. So this is the Stop Council Plan Changes announcement. It wasn't an announcement, but is quickly going into legislation. So we are stopping our plan changes. As you know, we saw some of this. We didn't see all of this. And so this is kind of a further step along the way. And so this takes two pieces of our work, freshwater and geothermal, and basically puts a stop on them for a length of time, so in a sense yet to be determined. In terms of where this leaves us, so as I just said, geothermal was on the agenda as a fully formed plan change. It's now been removed from the agenda. Arslan and Kareem will be talking about the aquaculture strategy update, which is on your agenda as well. Oh, yeah. And that's one of those exempted plan changes, so that's okay.
Could I just ask whoever's on Zoom just to mute yourselves, please? Thank you.
Okay. And not dealt with in the operating environment, but we have two river document processes on the go. For the Rangataiki is reviewing its river document and Tarawera is building one. Both of those feed theoretically into our RMA processes, but again, they will also be on stop as well. So, but they are things just to watch for. So just in terms of the draft plan changes, they will be in the end robust products. They will be needed at some point for when council needs them. And the key point also is that they are a large part, but only one part of the programs. So we just want to step through what the programs are doing and how they're treating those plan changes, geothermal and then fresh water. So if I can hand over to these two.
Oh, Councillor Nees.
Ask a question, if that's all right. With the extension of the freshwater plan change notification to December 2027, does that make the decision on how we process the all of those pre-RMA consents a bit simpler, because we can't wait until 2027. So we potentially should be thinking about using our new science, but having to use our existing plans as the guiding legislation during that process, and we just get on and do them.
Yes, correct. I mean, James can talk a bit more about this. There is national policy direction coming as well, so that theoretically may have some impact on the processing or what we're looking for. But the bottom line is we're left with our current plan and our new science. Yeah.
All right, so more specifics on the geothermal plan change. As Stephen said, we thought we were going to be sitting here today with a plan change for you, so quite a different presentation for us. But as he also mentioned, it means that there's no wasted effort here. We've got basically that complete, robust package that we're just in the final stages of, because obviously we, pumped our feet on the brakes a little bit after the announcement, but we are just tidying up the last few things. We've just had our legal review come back, and we're going to pop that all in a nice little box, pop it on the shelf, ready to go when we are able to then proceed with that work. So it's really great that none of that is wasted. That'll be that full package, including our whole plan provisions that we workshop with you, and our Section 32 report, which also goes into that massive evidence base with all our technical and science reports, which, as you're all aware, a lot of that came through our system management plan. So again, that was work that was done not just for the plan change, but also for our Rotorua system management plan and our other monitoring, compliance processes. So this, like I say, gives us an opportunity to be future ready. We'll have that sort of sitting there complete, ready to then obviously change, reformat, refine into whatever the new system looks like whenever it becomes online. And where that leaves us is our other work. As we say, we have a lot of that as well, and our system management plan work becomes even more important. But probably the big question that keeps coming up is exemptions. Can we apply for one? Should we apply for one? So we've obviously given this a lot of thought. Firstly, there's very limited guidance at the moment from the government on the exemption process. I believe it's still kind of in process, and they were looking to put that out in the next month or two. But first and foremost, we're not on the automatic exemption list. So they gave a small list of things that could just go automatically, no application. So you may have noticed Rotorua Lakes Council just notified their natural hazards plan change 8. That's because hazards are an automatic exemption. Unfortunately, geothermal is not. So that leaves us into the other exemption process. We obviously think we have a lot of great reasons to continue, especially our community groups. We've had so much engagement along the way. Our Ahi Karoa Rupu are obviously quite disappointed with the plan stop. So we've really considered whether applying for an exemption is a good thing to do. Unfortunately, there's almost the same or more reasons not to do it. We have a sector of the community who were saying, why are you going ahead with this when we know RM reform is coming? The government are very clearly giving us a direction here that they want the plan changes to stop. We've had the draft geothermal strategy come out. There's just so many other things that just make us think it's not the best use of our time, our resources, our community's time and resources to go on at this point. We think it's better to focus on our other work, implementing that Rotorua SMP, using that in our decision making, and then also going through the rest of our work program, which Freya will go through.
Just before we move on to Freya, I just want to acknowledge all the work that has gone on in this space, and that it must have been quite a blow to hear that news for the team working on the geothermal. And I'm really admiring your positivity and the fact that you're pulling out this, all is not lost. The work has been done, the work's there, we're future ready with it all. And nevertheless, I know how frustrating that must be. And for the community as well, that all engaged in this process all along the way. So thank you so much to the team involved. Oh, Councillor Thurston.
I just wanted to echo the comments of the chairman with regards bouquets being handed out to you and the team and to Penny. I think there was an amazing amount of work that went into this, particularly behind the scenes with the Hokainga, but the political environment, it is what it is. But I have raised this a couple of times, and I don't know if it should have been directed to Penny or you guys can help me here, but when we were going through the hearing process for the system management plan, a number of the submitters referenced the fact that the Waitangi Tribunal was coming to Rotorua mid-year. Now, I gather it's come, it's been, and it's gone. What was there's been very little coverage of this in the media. Have you had any feedback on what,
So
where it all landed? The fact that
it hasn't completed yet. There's still another round of hearings to be held later this year, I believe. So it's still midway through the process. Yeah. So you unlikely to hear anything until mid to late next year is my guess. It's a little hard to know with timeframes, but it's an ongoing process. But you're absolutely right. That was one of, so that was raised through the system management plan and through the plan change feedback. There is part of the community that felt that that process should be completed ahead of any plan change process. This halt for the time being enables that to happen to a certain degree, and I guess we wait to see whatever framework we end up for managing resources going forward, and there will have to be something. So as Elsa mentioned, we anticipate that the work that's been done to date, while it may not just slot into that as is, it is able to be picked up and adapted really quite quickly, which what we're hearing is that will need to happen. Whatever happens will happen fast.
But please pass on our thanks from the Rotorua constituency councillors to Penny and to you two in particular. I know it was a hell of a lot of work went into that. Thanks so much.
The McDonald.
Just a point of clarification then for you, just from what you said and what Councillor Thurston asked around the treaty settlement. If in the treaty settlement there is a request through that settlement to address what we've been addressing in the thermal space, where does this work then sit in the scheme of things? Will that be a green light to proceed under the settlement that's being heard at the moment, or will the directives from central government putting a hold on things take precedent to whatever comes out of the treaty settlement?
So whatever comes out of the treaty settlement, we can't act on until there's a change in legislation from the government. So the government would have to pick that up first, change legislation, and then I guess tell council how they expect us to respond to that.
The leader.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Before we can make a decision on what we do with this, did you go to the Minister's launch of the geothermal strategy on last week? And if you did, was there any commentary inferences made in terms of what the expectation was going forward?
Yeah, so there was the Minister's launch where they said we're releasing a strategy. The strategy is very high level, so there's not a huge amount of detail in that, but it is absolutely pushing towards energy and development, and then I guess trying to wrap those other geothermal uses around it. In terms of the launch, there wasn't a whole lot of direction, but the following day there was a workshop with MB and industry, and Penny and I attended that also to sit alongside. There was that was perhaps where we got more direction. So there was a lot of iwi groups in the room, there was a lot of industry groups in the room, there was a lot of councils in the room. There certainly was absolutely a sense that they expect there to be some traction in terms of enabling geothermal development. But alongside that, there was also some really clear messaging, which was lovely to hear, around protecting those places that need to be protected also. So I think there was in in the minister's speech that was released, which was a little different to what he said on the day, I think due to timing is my guess, there is a very clear statement in there that says, don't worry, we will not be putting a power plant next to Pahutu Geyser. So that's nice messaging. That's not messaging that we always hear coming out of that space, but it is there. But yes, absolutely. I think there is an expectation that going forward, councils will be looking at how they can enable use where it can happen for geothermal.
Any other questions on that?
Yeah, so I guess to follow on from that, whilst the plan change may have been put on hold and you were all, I'm sure, very worried that we were going to be sitting around bored, we are not. We've got rather a lot of work to be getting on with and keep going. So in particular, implementation of the Rotorua System Management Plan will be important. So there was a lot of actions identified in that document that we need to be getting on with. The community has an expectation that we will start to follow through on some of those. Completion of the Tauranga Geothermal System Management Plan is going to be another really important task now that we don't have the plan change to follow through, which I think we had mentioned when we reduced the scope of the plan change from regional to just Rotorua. We indicated then how important the Tauranga System Management Plan will be. So that's going to take some more work with the community in identifying values and looking at some of those operational areas where we can improve our practice around geothermal use in Tauranga. Completing the review of the Kawerau Geothermal System Management Plan with the tappers, so that's working with the user group for that system. And then a lot of work which is around that geothermal strategy, what that looks like, what that means for council. Whatever comes out of the treaty claims will be something that will need to be over and ready to move on when government gives us that direction. And then a lot of that BAU, so state of the environment monitoring, consent and compliance. Another big area that I think we flagged last time is looking to initiate a system management plan for Te Tiriti geothermal. At this stage, that's a lot of relationship building with all the different groups that have an interest there, and just early days in terms of getting everybody around the table that needs to be at the table to have a discussion about what that might look like. So plenty to be getting on with.
I'll just pause you there, Freya, because I think Councillor Winters has got his hand up. Apologies, those councillors on Zoom, we've got a bit of a technical issue here. So you look like microscopic people. So it's very hard to see whether your hand's up. But Councillor Winters, we think we can see a little yellow dot in your top left corner. So do you have a question?
Yeah, hi, morning team. I'm pleased I'm a little spot in the corner because I've just had a nose job done yesterday.
Nothing
Penny,
personal.
Yeah. Penny, I want to come back to your comment implementing the Rotorua System Management Plan. Because with the plan, my understanding, the system management plan that we signed off on has no teeth until a plan change adopts the system management plan. So how do we implement it if we have no teeth? Message ends.
Yeah, so that's partly right. So the part of the system management plan that has no teeth are those parts around consenting, so embedding the policies and rules around limits to use and take and use of the geothermal resource. That's the part that the plan was going to pick up and give teeth to in terms of that regulatory framework. There are still a lot of other elements of that system management plan that are operational that sit outside the regulatory framework. So, for example, setting up the Rotorua Geothermal Management Group with our partners in terms of the day-to-day operation of the system. Lots of work around working with tangata whenua groups around Mātauranga Māori monitoring, getting some of those projects up and running. There's probably lots of smaller specific projects that have come out of that system management plan, and they're all still really important. They're just not that regulatory part of the document.
So, okay, understand that. So my next question is, how does the community have confidence that we can control those consents, discharges, takes, whatever, if we don't have this plan change? Is it still operational under the old one?
It's still operational under the old plan, that's correct.
Ah,
So
Right.
we do still have a limit on the system. We're
Yep.
going to also heat limit. So there is no longer a heat limit. Some of those things we can bring through operational kind of guidelines. So discharges, for example, we can do better to manage discharge through operational SOPs through the consenting team. We just can't require those changes through the plan.
Okay, thanks for that, Penny.
Penny, in terms of I can't remember what it's called, super deep, or what's it called? The supercritical. Where does that sit? I mean, obviously it's the Kawerau region that would impact, am I right? So without the plan change, is there risk that that can sort of happen willy-nilly and unsustainably, or?
No, so supercritical that you're hearing a lot about in the media, it's actually outside the Bay of Plenty region at this time. So it's in the Waikato region that they have one site and it's proof of concept. So the money that's been earmarked is around proving that you can even do it, that you can drill to that depth and that you can get that high temperature to the surface without melting your well, essentially. You're talking extreme temperatures. So it's outside the region at this stage. If it were to be proven and they were to attempt to do that in the Bay of Plenty region now under our existing plan, we still have protection measures in there. So there is still the requirement to prove that you're not going to have an adverse effect on the environment under the existing plan. So we would have measures in there that we could require sufficient information to be sure that we had enough certainty that there wasn't going to be any huge environmental bad outcomes.
And the draft RMA replacement would still have those protections in it. I'm just, aware of how keen Minister Jones is on this, and just wondering what the reading the tea leaves looks like with that ability to.
Yeah, that's a hard pass. I can't answer that except to say I would anticipate that there will always be an element of sustainability required in any legislation going forward. But we wait to see, I guess. Yeah.
On that point, Freya, in the Kawerau geothermal region, historically, Mercury has run the model in terms of that sustainability. Are they still heavily involved in that? And is that forecast to continue? Because you've got to have someone running the model.
So I'm getting probably a bit outside my territory now. This is more Penny's area of expertise. My understanding is that the 4 tappers all have an agreement for the use of that model. Yes, Mercury is still one of those parties.
If there are no further questions, we can jump to Freshwater and quickly run through their program.
Joy of joys. Thank you very much.
Here. Maybe I could chuck a hand grenade into this discussion up front. You happy for me to do that?
Absolutely. Go ahead. Lob away. I'm a bit scared.
So look,
but
this is a generalist overview of reading the papers today. And it's all about how do we operate going forward. But I think that this issue is not just about the Bay of Plenty Regional Council. It's about the regional sector in totality. And before you can make an informed decision about the way forward, I think we have to ask ourselves as a sector, how did we end up in the position that we have, where the government of the day as a result of advocacy, concern, have taken the moves that they have. Because unless we answer that question, you're never going to get a really good consideration of how you're going to operate going further. And I appreciate that this is not an issue that the councillors here can give direct, well, it's up to the chief executive, essentially, of this organisation, together with the senior leadership team, to say, what is the culture within this organisation? What is the culture within the regional sector, the whole 11 of us, that has led to this focus on regional councils being questioned as to their relevance? That's the guts of it. And I think, to give you a couple of examples, because this is what annoys ministers and the government. You've got a road down the middle. On one side of the road, you've got one regional council. The other side, you've got another. And the rules that apply to land use, consenting and all that on one side, totally different to on the other side. Same land use, same geology, yet the rules are different. And they're rightly, in my mind, raising the question, how come? Now, it's only the chief executive of this organisation, in our case, that can answer that. So as an example, if you look in the Waikato, you have permitted activities for effluent discharge. You come across the road, in the Bay of Plenty, you have consenting. In the Waikato, you have a requirement that in terms of those effluent things, because this is what I know about, they accept the drop test, which is an engineering standard. Across the road here, our staff say, no, we're not going to accept it. And it's those conflicts, and I'm sure they occur throughout the country, 11 regional councils, that the observers looking in saying, how come it's operating like this? I don't know the answer to that, but what I do know is that if we are to survive as a sector going forward, we probably have to go to take a step back, or the executive are, and say, do we continue with all these issues about permitted and non-permitted and all that criteria, or does the regional sector look at an enabling culture to meet the demands or the requests of the government going forward? I don't know. It's a big question. But unless we're prepared to answer that or address that as a sector going forward, I don't think you can make much progress in terms of the way you're going to operate going forward.
And I think you raised some excellent points. I think we'll pick this up in the workshop so after this meeting, we'll be going into a future positioning workshop, and that's a really good starting point that we can actually have a bit of discussion around. But yeah, I don't know if staff have got any comments now, but we will pick it up again in the workshop.
I think it's probably best left for the workshop.
Thank you.
Can I just, because it might be something you might want to address, and picking up from the chair's comments, there's a lot of the papers we've got talk about the strengths and this is what we do and this is why we're so good and so on. But I was thinking, if I was doing a SWOT analysis, what are our weaknesses? What are our costs? And so in terms of this presentation, what are they, be interested in hearing, what was the thought around what costs we're putting on users, what costs we're putting on our, whether it's our ratepayers or whether it's the people who use the resources or whatever it is, what are the weaknesses in our situation and how did we address that? If there's any thinking in that area.
So maybe we can start with the presentation, Freshwater, and if your questions aren't answered through, then perhaps we can pick them up so that we've got a kind of, this is where we're at now, if that's okay. Okay. Thanks, team.
Okay, look, I'll kick off with what we are going to do now that we find ourselves in the situation that we find ourselves in, and leave that bigger stuff perhaps for the workshop. So yeah, well, we're expected to be in front of you a bit like the geothermal team, with a bit more of an insight about what the MPSFM was going to look like, a draft plan change, and a lot more sort of certainty than we do now. But we are where we're at, And this is all about what we expect we're going to do going forward. So where is my there it is. We've started off from the premise that we wanted a simpler, more robust and easier to administer plan. So going to that question about that general direction of travel, we would hope to make things simpler and easier and more cost effective to develop. We've listened to a lot of feedback from stakeholders, and we've dealt with some pretty interesting issues and new science, for example, groundwater, where we've in fact got draft provisions sitting in the wings, which are generally more enabling than they were previously. So in a sense, for surface water and for groundwater, more available than we thought was available previously. So heading in the right direction. The material that we've got sitting in the wings now is ready to be adapted to whatever comes next. So we have a simpler plan. We have the provisions from a number of disparate plans all pulled into one place, and they reflect what the community has been telling us. They're pragmatic, they're simple. So if we were told to go tomorrow to something new, we'd be able to draw on that material and adapt it reasonably quickly. But one of the critical gaps in the process to date is that what we have is untested. So it hasn't been through the rigor of a sort of statutory process. People haven't torn it apart and really challenged it. And as such, it doesn't have the same weight as some of that historic material that we've been sort of relying on over the years. So that puts us in a bit of a quandary, because we have a lot of material that we want to be used. We want it to be available for consents, but it's not tested to the same degree that that historic material has been. We think it's better, but it hasn't been through the process. So that's the focus going forward. That's what we think is really important, is to get our heads around how we can use the work that we have done over the large number of years and that expense that we've invested on behalf of our community to assist our consents teams, to assist our communities to make use of that knowledge. So using the simple example of groundwater and surface water, how do we pitch that information to our community in a way that they can understand that there is this new science, but it also meshes in with our existing consent processes? We've got other examples. For example, in the water quality space, we've done a lot of work around what we consider sensitive receiving environments. So we've got some science that tells us what the thresholds to damaging those environments are, and that will be relevant to consents in the future. How do we share it? And what do we, we're not going to have a regulatory or like a statutory process to run it through, but we do want to have it available so it's used. So it's consumed by AI, so it's available for the community.
So can I just ask a question there? So if we've got a known kind of environmental bottom line for a sensitive receiving area, but let's just say the new national direction for freshwater is more enabling, and the bottom line thresholds are much higher. So I don't know whether I mean higher or lower, but you know what I mean. How does having that information, and even if it is shared and people are listening, prevent the situation where it's ignored because legislation is more enabling than the science and knowledge we have?
At the time the new legislation comes in, we'll be subject to that legislation. But between now and then, we have this knowledge. And I guess that's our focus at the moment, is how do we use that knowledge now under our existing legislative regime so our communities can have the benefits of what we know. Otherwise, it just sits on our side of the firewall and it's not used.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, thank you. I just want to test what you mean by untested. Is it the science, which our assumption is pretty robust, that's been untested, or is it our proposed way of applying it? that's untested, because I would hate to think that our science is untested. I'd like to think that that's pretty robust.
No, it's exactly the latter. It's our thoughts on how to use that science in a policy setting. So at the moment, science, there's a whole range of, upper and lower bounds in science. And one of the goals of the planning process is to work with your community and find that accepted point, that clear decision. Yes, we're going to err on the side of caution, or conversely, we're going to be a little bit more optimistic about what that science is telling us. That's the testing that we've been unable to do. And that's the challenge we've got now, is how do we provide more certainty just to streamline the processes for the next couple of years. And I guess another example of the sorts of things that we really want to be able to kind of resolve is in the area of, say, OSET, where we've spent the last few months talking with the TAs who've really supported the simplification work that we've done in the plan. And we've got to a point where we've taken a very complex plan and we've reduced it to some very simple and straightforward rules. And now we're sort of having to roll back to the old way. And we think that there are some learnings from what we've done and getting to the new plan that we can perhaps retrofit into the way we manage the old plan. So it's that sort of thing. So having said that, I thought it's probably worthwhile now having a talk to the team who are out there engaging. And if I can hand over to Gemma, she can talk a little bit about what's happening on the ground with that rural sector.
Hi everyone. So I've been engaging with 5 groups. The highlighted freshwater management units are the ones that have been represented in that engagement. We have the Te Arawa Pastoral Collective group, which represent Rotorua, Te Arawa Lakes and down to the coast, so Kaitana Waihi, Tarawera as well. We had set up a Kaituna group, a Waihi Estuary group, and Ohiwa Harbour group, and one across the Rangataiki Plains, which was represented with people from Waitahanui, Tarawera and Rangataiki, and the hills around it as well. So far we've had 6 round the kitchen table meetings, 3 on farm discussions, so 1 on a deer farm post a recent weather event, 1 on a sheep and beef and 1 on dairy. There's been sort of varied reception as to how many meetings they might want to have with policy. I normally take a land management officer with me as well because they have existing relationships with those groups. They're a mix of farmers that self-nominated from the drainage schemes, nominated by other farmers or our land management officers, or have previously been involved in our freshwater futures groups. There's been quite a mix of a level of understanding of what government requires of them currently. So I think some of the ones that are perhaps less involved with ministers are quite keen to actually gauge what it looks like going forward, what the farm plan requirements might be in the future for them. Although I would note that the farm plan regs are changing as we speak. The other one to note, I guess, is we also continue to work with the rural and environmental sector group that's set up and discuss with industry.
Thank you. I know you haven't got any groups in Tauranga that is predominantly horticulture in many instances. So do you think you've got adequate coverage from the groups that you have been talking to?
I would say this is a start point, and we were gauging sort of the interest in it, given the uncertainty in the RM reform NPSFM space. This was our sort of taster. I would note Rotorua Lakes, I would say we would definitely be looking to engage with them in the future. They've got a new catchment group for Lake Rotorua called Wai Rotorua, which potentially we could meet with later in the year. They also have Lake Ruafukaitu catchment group existing, and what to do with the Rule 11 lakes is another one. So definitely more to be done in this space if that's the direction council wants to go in.
Right, and another question is, there are the hardy annual people, sector groups that will respond to any plan change that we put up and put in submissions, and that's the likes of Federated Farmers, etc., Dairy NZ, whatever. Are you actually engaging with them as well?
Yes, so they're part of the Rural and Environmental Sector Group. So our last meeting with them was sort of May or June. We have had individual meetings as well. So we're going to have another one with, when we meet with Hort NZ, we meet with Hort NZ, Avocado NZ, NZKGI, all sort of in one meeting. We recently had a field trip with them out to kiwi fruit and avocado orchards too. So yes, there's plenty of chats going on and a lot of further work to be done with those industry bodies working on our minimum standards and their industry requirements and how we can work together.
Councillor Scott.
How much of your conversations ends with, we don't know at the moment where that's heading? We're unsure, can't answer that question. Because if it's a significant amount, it might be a lot of work that's going to be undone because suddenly a piece of information arrives for us, which is different from what we were hoping for.
I think we start with that comment that it's an uncertain environment that we're working in. But I guess my summary of it for at least some of the groups is they still see value in engaging with council policy staff and getting their sort of positions in the practical realities of life on farm through to us. Our initial discussions with them are on quite a high level basis of the science that we were talking about. This is what we see in your catchment. You know, you're in a sensitive catchment, say Kaituna Waihi estuary, and those guys, I would say, are less keen on regular meetings and more probably hoping to wait and see what comes out of central government's changes in the next 6 months.
So the big benefit is to say, regardless of what the plan looks like and regardless of what everything's happening, this is some data we're seeing that you want to take into account in your catchment. Is that really the best outcome we can expect from these things?
I'm looking, from my perspective, is to get that sort of specific feedback on minimum standards, practicalities of it. We'll talk about some of the themes in the following slides of feedback we've got from them so far.
I think the
that might help
relationships
answer.
are crucial as well, aren't they? Like, yeah, having that engagement ongoing. Councillor Von Daddelson, you have your hand up.
Thank you. Look, I think this, the farmer engagement, the community engagement, it doesn't matter that there is uncertainty. I think it is absolutely positive and necessary to build relationships so that when we do come to change, be able to do something, that we've actually got really good coordination going and good input from both sides. What my concern now is, and I think our chairman leader raised a really good point, what are you doing in the engagement with our bounding between councils, between regions, to ensure that we actually have a robust process going forward, where there are differing rules now. Can we, are you doing any work now to try to get a coordinated approach between regions, especially for us between Waikato and the Gisborne and the also the territorials?
I guess I'll just
Question.
comment on
Yeah.
one part, probably before passing it over to others. We do have regular meetings in the freshwater farm plan space between all regional councils with MFE staff. So that's one way we're all engaged together.
I'm thinking, I'm thinking of actual one-on-one with our neighbours, whether they be territorial or regional, rather than through a government agency. I think once you put a government agency in there, you get a stilted conversation, and I think we need to address the issue and try to build alignment, especially between Waikato and Gisborne.
Yeah, so if I can answer that pretty directly. So it'd be fair to say in the last year or so that that council to council engagement, particularly between our neighbouring regional councils, has tapered off a little bit as we all sort of deal with the uncertainty. And I personally have an expectation that the government is going to be providing a much more structured framework for us all to work within. That's probably going to remove some of the some of those differences that we have between our plans. But prior to then, we did have regular engagement with our two partner councils, and we were regularly sitting across with, say, Waikato Regional Council, talking about how we can do things together, how we can standardise provisions. So it's difficult and it is hard, but it is something that most of us put some effort into doing. At the moment, I think we're sort of all in that space of waiting to see what that new framework looks like. But for sure, we will be working with others where we can to commonise, particularly at those boundaries.
Through the chair, just to add as well, in addition to what James has outlined, we have regular catch-ups with all of the policy teams. We coordinate that through the policy managers across the Bay of Plenty. So we regularly connect with each of the local councils to talk about our policy programs of work, where they're at, how they're progressing, where there might be overlap or opportunity, joint opportunity together. And of course, we're part of the active part of the regional sector. And so through Te Uru Kahika, there is also a freshwater work program where we collectively coordinate as regional councils and unitary authorities across New Zealand.
We
Yeah,
have
Amita.
Councillor White doing with
Well,
a
just, can I
question.
just finish?
Yeah, sure.
That's fine, Namita, but I know in the transport area, in a tight city like Tauranga, there was huge siloed thinking. Even though we thought we were talking, it was very siloed, and it wasn't until we actually got that joint committee going that we actually saw progress at a staff level. And so I think this is something that should, we've now got time, because the government's told us we have to have time to get, but so we don't want to waste that time. And we've got to build stronger relationships, is what I'm thinking, because you've been talking for you've always been talking to your neighbours, but that hasn't resulted in coordinated plans. So it's been siloed thinking in the past, and what we now know is that's not going to be acceptable. So let's start working on that now. While we have time, don't wait for the legislation, build the really strong relationships now so that we can move forward when the legislation, with a coordinated approach that actually is a fit for purpose.
We've got Councillor White with a question, and we are kind of running a little bit over time with this segment. So perhaps after Councillor White's question, we can sort of chunk on a bit. Thanks. Councillor White.
Yeah, kia ora. Thank you for the presentation. No doubt you're connecting with Māori land trusts and corporations, of which there are many across the catchments. How's that going? I think their voice is going to be important in terms of relationships into the future and how things might pan out. So how's that going? Are you noticing any initial tensions, or are things coming together okay?
So our first initial group is with Te Aroa Pastoral Collective. So they are our first cab off the ranks in that Māori block space, and they did emphasise at our meeting the importance of engaging with them and as separate to engaging with iwi.
You're talking about Te Ara Aratawa?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think as you move across tribal boundaries, you know, the whole notion of relationships and coordinated effort is important. I think at some point trying to get everybody mobilized into a common interest to move things along would be great. So all the best.
So some key themes from the farming discussions to date is frustration with duplication between central government, industry and regional council. MPI and MFE are getting into that catchment space. Farmers already provide a lot of data to industry, and I guess their concern is that they don't want to spend more time in the office and less time on the farm. So how can we work together so we are not duplicating information requirements? The importance of flexibility within our rule framework. So the minimum standards approach is not flexible. However, providing for a farm plan to provide alternative options is how we can build flexibility into that. Whether that flexibility is available across the region or only in those sort of lower reduction catchments is still up for debate, and may be impacted by changes to resource management reform. There's been quite an interest in long-term trends and evidence of change over time. So discussing how effluent systems have changed over time and how fencing to date may have impacted or improved water quality. This question the achievability of some targets given our climate change estimates specifically for sediment. Opposition to consenting drainage schemes as well as minimum standards around drainage setbacks. Concern over the impacts of kiwi fruit contouring. They're very open to solutions and a lot of them already have treatment wetlands, detainment bunds. There's concern over land value and farm viability. The importance of recognising early adoption of good practice, and so they're not penalised in any future freshwater plan change. Keen to hear more about incentives, keen to work collaboratively, and a desire for certainty because there's been a lot of years where they don't know what's going to happen as well.
Great, thank you. So I know you've got quite a few more slides, but we are running out of time. So what I'm wondering is if you could summarise just briefly the content of those slides and then take us on to the next steps. And I'm sure you'll be sharing the slideshow with us afterwards so councillors can take time to go over those slides.
Oh, I'll whip around this one. So flexibility is key. Steep erosion prone pasture is not necessarily the biggest source of sediment when we go out on farms. So those spring heads can produce quite significant erosion. Land use changes are already happening. That photo there is around 1,000 hectares of sheep and beef land that's been converted to forestry in the Pikawai catchment in the last 3 years. You can't be green when you're in red. So a lot of their actions are depending on payouts, you know, those sorts of things. It's expensive compliance for forestry harvesting on steep land and that importance of relationships. So every time I've met with the farmers, they reiterate how valued their relationship with land management officers are. And I guess they even appreciate a policy person that's brave enough to turn up to their kitchen table. Good
morning, everybody. I'm just going to
rush through these slides and you can have a look later in your own time. As James briefly mentioned, our TA meetings to date have been really positive. And I will just skip to the next steps. We've clarified the roles as well, and we're simplifying the process and making the most of short streamlined provisions and simplifying maintenance systems and how things are done on the ground. So the next steps, we'll continue to meet with TAs and see how we can assist them with using the operative plan we have now better, given its whole own regional plan with lengthy provisions. And we're just going to see what learnings we can apply from the draft plan change to benefit Offset now. Discussions around potentially building some tools to help navigate the current plan that we have now. And yeah, just see what comes out from government announcements.
Okay, I have to whip through these two. So water quantity, been working on it for a long time, and just wanted to sort of, there's a bit of scene setting with James talked before about the new information, new science report on allocation limits, etc. That has left us in a bit of conundrum with new information and sort of working out the extent that we publicise and use that, but water allocation is a discretionary activity, and in particular groundwater limits are not actually set in the plan, so we have some opportunities. I'll flick through. We've done some topic testing, especially with tangata whenua, which Te Aomarangi have set up meetings with the willing to have discussions. They've generally been on a positive framework and have gone well. And the key thing we've brought is revised information. So that's our tangata whenua meetings. So our kind of next steps are socialising that new information and the implication of limits at the same time as not having a plan change. Identifying, understanding, incorporating those tangata whenua values. We've got accounting issues that we are still resolving. There's quite a lot of takes from very small dams and things that are a little harder to keep account of, and making available a surface water allocation status tool is continuing to be a focus of our work. You can see that lower map there. We've been doing some work on managing minimum flows. That's when there's been a drought, flows have got low, and maybe we want to reduce or stop the taking of water. Obviously, a little bit of that has been going on in the background, but it's not been comprehensive. We're now looking at having a region-wide and comprehensive approach. And we're having discussions with stakeholders that are potentially impacted by change.
So just to clarify, with the minimum flow management, with new national direction, we can still manage that, even if it's more permissive. We can still actually restrict when we get to minimum flows.
Yeah, the RMA's got, I think it's section 329 that allows council to declare a regional water shortage, and that can overwrite if we have determined that, irrespective of what's in consents or what's in our limits, etc., that there is an issue that needs to be managed. We have that. What this tool does is allow us to extrapolate our knowledge, I guess, from the one place where we may have a continuous gauging site to say, and these streams that are perhaps the same colour on that little chart behave in a very similar way. And so it's assisting us to implement it. Obviously, if we had plan set limits and plans and consents, we wouldn't need to rely on that section 329, but it is there as a backstop.
Yep.
And that is us.
Oh, well, thank you ever so much, and apologies for having to rush you through all of this important information and work. And just to reiterate, as with the geothermal team, thank you so much for all the hard work and dedication you've put in over the many, many years with this. And I know how frustrating it must be to keep being paused again and paused. Again, admire your positivity. So it's really great to see that you're kind of looking at what can we do rather than dwelling on what can't we do. So I think that's a great culture mindset that Toi Moana has, and to see it coming through from all the teams is incredible. So thank you from all of us for all of the work that you've been doing and are continuing to do.
Yeah, good. I just, on a similar vein, I try to be constructively critical, but the other end of that continuum is credit where credit's due. And in particular, the feedback that I've been getting from, in particular, Gemma's interaction with the rural community has been really appreciative. It's valued. And most importantly, the recipients consider that the planning approach and their appreciation of the issues and the complexity that farmers are dealing with has stepped up to another level. So the last question would be, Gemma, is that your view in terms of that interaction, whether it's Wairoto or Little Waihi or wherever, that the planning staff are getting a better appreciation of the complexity of some of these issues?
Yeah, I think it reiterates the importance of that flexibility approach that both industry and farmers have been sort of supporting and pushing. It's always beneficial to be out on site and talking to people rather than just in the office writing. And I guess they all acknowledge it at the start. Oh, I don't want someone just because they've got a degree in something telling me what I can do on farm. And I said, well, I'm the person with the degree, and that's why I'm here with you. But I do think the relationship building aspect of it is beneficial for both parties.
Thank you.
Thank you. So,
Just quickly, and I didn't want to not acknowledge it, but I really found the piece of work where you did that coding of current topics into the potential new framework, for me, incredibly helpful. And it just shows again, that you're looking ahead to see what piece of work we already have done will slot and where. So thank you for that.
Great. So we need to just make the recommendation is that we receive the report. That's all we need to do. We don't need to approve anything except to receive the report. So can I have a mover and second? Thank you, Campbell and Thurston. Lovely. Great. So now we're on to aquaculture. So Stephen and Aslan, welcome.
Oh, sorry. So before I proceed, I'd like to take the report as read. So the amendment that we're making to the coastal plan is statutory in nature, and so the laws, legislations under which this is being done come under the treaty settlement obligations, and therefore they are exempted by the government's recent national direction of pausing the plan changes. So the two legislations that I was referring to, Maori Commercial Aquaculture Claim Settlement Act, this requires regional council to reflect aquaculture settlement areas into the coastal plan, and the other is Whakatoa Claim Settlement Act. This is EV specific legislation, and that requires regional council to reflect the reserved aquaculture areas in the coastal plan. So what we are adding a new schedule, aquaculture, Schedule 18 to the coastal plan, which starts with the context of the aquaculture, legislative context, and then goes ahead with detailing aquaculture settlement areas and reserved areas. And then it follows on with consolidated map, which shows the reserved areas and the aquaculture settlement areas. It is important to note that the law does not require us to, when making this plan change, that we proceed the process schedule 1, which means that we did not go into the consultation of the general public for the purpose of submissions, hearings, and deliberations. However, we did inform the EV authorities, EV aquaculture organizations, and marine and coastal area applicants about this plan change and update. So this is the consolidated map that is going into the Schedule 18, which shows 3 areas which are aquaculture settlement areas, highlighted yellow, pink or purple. These are the reserved areas for Whakatohea, and the orange one, rectangle above A, that's the existing marine farm area. And so the recommendations are for this committee to adopt the Schedule 18 to be added to the coastal plan. Authorize general manager to make amendments, minor editorial amendments, and important to note that this Schedule 1 was not required to make this plan change. Thank you.
Thank you, Aslan. Any questions? Okay, so could I have a mover and seconder? Councillor Thurston, Chairman Leader. In favour, say aye. Against, carried. Thank you so much. That was nice and brief. So the last item of the morning, we are on to our prioritisation and decision-making framework. So over to Steve and Davina. Welcome.
Morena councillors, hopefully this one's as brief. Just introduce Davina Cochrane, who's making her committee debut today. Who co-authored this paper alongside me. This paper responds, so late last year you endorsed a prioritisation and phasing model as a way to ensure the work of council is well aligned and focused on what matters. This paper responds to the request from you at that time to return 6 monthly with a review of the model. Obviously at a high level, priorities are set through the LTP process. This model is designed to support consideration of significant matters that arise in the periods in between LTPs. The nature of these exercises is that they're out of date almost as soon as you complete them. As an example, the leadership team, subsequent to this paper being produced, has undertaken another quarterly review of the prioritisation. Also note that you've got a workshop coming up immediately after this meeting, which may also result in changes to the work program. So I guess we seek your feedback on whether this model remains a useful way of assessing priorities more broadly. And just over to you for discussion.
Questions, Councillor Nees?
Just a comment to start off with. I think the prioritisation framework is sensible, seems sensible, and the decision-making framework sound, but I'm not so certain about the high-level work plan. And, we've got some things in Horizon 1 that we've already done or we've identified may need to slow. So, for example, treaty implementation of the Te Whānau Apanui, we had a presentation from them that said that they wouldn't settle under the current government. We've also been rethinking timeframes around divestment of port shares. And so that is not an urgent thing. We're thinking a little bit longer. So there's a number of little things like that I just question about where they are actually, whether they're in the right box, because things are moving so fast and, we've got more information. So therefore it means that they may need to move.
So through the chair, absolutely. This was already out of date. I note that there are some key focus areas for you, and we will discuss this further in the workshop following this meeting that aren't shown here yet. And that was really a result of this being the LTP work program that has been progressively being updated. But I do note there are a number of things that have shifted in this space, some that you've mentioned, others that aren't on there that we do anticipate would need to be be added onto there include the regional deal, which is clearly a new project and priority for us as staff, as well as you've already mentioned earlier today, system reform. So that's another area where we are contributing thinking to. So I do note that that does need to be updated, and I'm sure as a result of that, we are actually seeking an amendment to the resolution number 4 in particular to note that the high-level work program for where it says note the high-level work program plan for the remainder of 2025, that we will need to update this post the workshop, because we anticipate that there will be other matters that are raised in the workshop session following this meeting that we will then need to reflect in this work plan.
Councillor Crosbie.
Yeah, thank you. And we do have to start somewhere. When I was reading this, and it's not a new idea, but I think we need to separate out in our governance thinking this kind of work program, which is activity-based versus reform. They're different beasts. They require more input, to be honest, from the elected members. That's the reform part, as opposed to LTP, BAU. Things are changing in there. We understand that. But we're living in such a disruptive environment at the moment, and will be for the next 3 years. Who knows how longer. The elected members need to be able to get themselves the right information on the right topics, particularly from a strategic point of view with regard to reform, change, whatever that might look like. And all these other activities that come in from the side as a result of generally the central government. You know, like the city deal, bang, it's there. You got to deal with it in a short space of time for whatever reason. You know, they're talking about local government reform. That's a big topic, to say the least. And a whole lot of other things that will come and we don't know about yet. So as I say, to summarise my view is, yes, this is good and it's going to change all the time. You know, our priority framework for a lot of stuff. But I think if you start to merge reform into some of these things, it gets really messy. Messy for us to try and separate out. So personally, I'd like to see this and then probably another framework on how we're going to deal and allocate our time and your energy into the reform processes.
So can I just ask a question on that, Councillor Crosbie, with the emerging focus, do you see that having like a separate framework around it? Because to me, that is the looking ahead piece where we're beginning to work on these big bubbles that will be discussed more in the workshop as well, but that they're not actually slotted in with specific goals for work teams and KPIs and things like that, but they're actually things coming at us that we're really focusing on.
Obviously, they do. You know, if a reform is successful, it is then merged into the work program.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just a given. But I've always said you got to keep one eye on the day-to-day business and another eye on all these other things out here. And the way I think is really about not merging them all in. You'll just get lost and you'll go down so many rabbit holes, what ifs. Whereas there's still stuff has to happen today, which is this work program that's activity based, it's merges into a long-term plan, then annual plans, all that kind of stuff. But out here is still this disruptive world of potential and real change. And I think that elected members' time and energy needs to have a strong focus on what's coming at us and what's going to be real, rather than saying the staff are beavering away. And it does happen in this organisation a lot because they're so professional, in my view. They want to not engage us early, but present something with, you know, a whole lot of options. I think that particularly the new council needs to be really engaged early on and spend a lot of their time and energy and thinking on some of these more high-level strategic issues and change, good, bad or ugly, it doesn't really matter, rather than waiting and then getting presented something and then saying, oh, you know, you got a couple of short period of time to make a decision. So all I'm saying is, you know, this is really good and it's going to change all the time, but we also need to have a framework or a process that allocates elected members' time to those big topic issues, particularly when they require engagement, either with the government of the day or our territorial colleagues around the Bay of Plenty.
Councillor Von Daddelson.
Yeah, look, I'm absolutely in support of Councillor Crosby on this. I think there has to be a two-pronged prioritisation. That they are quite separate, and if we try to put them into one, we will get a distorted approach. So I back Councillor Crosby 100%. Thank you.
Okay, over to you, Steve. You've received some direction there. Just looking at the recommendations and how we incorporate that direction into the recommendations.
Yes, so I guess one thought I have is we're currently working on the induction program for the new council, and obviously there's a significant amount of thought going into how we provide the space for that new council and the support for that new council to do exactly what Councillor Crosby's highlighted, is kind of grapple with that uncertainty and focus on the on those strategic areas.
Yeah.
Not quite sure how to reflect that in the recommendations.
I don't think through you, Chair, they have to change a lot. You know, it's, yeah, you know, the new council will have those early workshops and they'll frame up how they want to approach it. You know, this is just my personal view. So I don't think recommend it, as long as the message is sent that, you know, there is a degree of separation, shall we say, of big national potential change versus BAU that we know about that we're going to put into the work program and prioritise.
I wonder if with recommendation 1 that we add on and emerging focus or something like that, because we've got receives a report, review of the Bay of Plenty Regional Council prioritisation and decision-making framework and high-level work plan. And would it make sense to add an emerging focus governance? I don't know. Or whether we just leave it as is, but we've noted that.
Through the chair, perhaps we leave it as is and pick up the emerging focus in the workshop, because that's the future forward. And then as a result of the workshop, there might be actions that come out of that then we will look to implement.
Yeah, okay. So should we have the amended recommendation 4 then with notes high level work plan for the remainder of 2025? And then what was your wording around updating after the workshop?
Through the chair, I had suggested that we would look to update the high-level work program post the workshop, but certainly the feedback seems to be to keep those separate, to keep the work plan and program in terms of LTP focus on delivery, getting work done, which I hear that key message coming through. So we will continue to get the work done, and we will update the work program to reflect changes in the direction that you've given, noting that it's out of date at the moment, to pick up the point made earlier. So we wouldn't need to then amend 4 to note that it'll be updated post workshop. We could just say, note that it will be updated with the most current direction of council, because then we can pick up those additional changes that were flagged earlier, that things are shifting, whether that's a result of the workshop or other bits of direction.
Yep. Sounds like that makes sense to everyone. So, yeah, great. Okay, Thurston and Campbell. All those in favour? Against? Carried. All right, thank you very much. That was awesome. And we're going to close the meeting now. So closed at 10:48 a.m, the strategy and policy meeting. And we'll go into a morning tea break and